How early inventors used science. Long before, science had a name. Before science was even a term we understood, ancient inventors were using scientific principles to build the world we live in today. Think about that for a second. There were no textbooks, no formal degrees, no fancy labs. Just raw curiosity and practical problem solving. What these early inventors achieved wasn't just the result of trial and error. They were already harnessing the basic principles of physics, chemistry, and engineering. They were just using them in ways that wouldn't be recognized as science until thousands of years later. Sounds like something out of a history book, right? But this is the story of how science started long before it even had a name. The ancient Egyptians and the pyramids, geometry in action. Let's kick things off with a civilization we all recognize, the Egyptians. You've seen those pyramids, right? If you're picturing massive stone structures perfectly aligned with the stars, you're not just imagining a wonder of the ancient world. You're looking at one of the earliest applications of geometry and engineering. The Egyptians built the Great Pyramid of Giza around 2560 BCE, and the precision with which they did it is mind-blowing. The pyramid was aligned almost exactly with the cardinal directions, which means they had to understand the Earth's geography in a way that was far beyond simple guesswork. They also understood the principles of levers and ramps, tools that helped them lift and move those enormous blocks of stone. They didn't call it physics, they didn't call it engineering, but that's exactly what they were doing. What's even crazier is that many of their methods, like the use of ropes to make straight lines or their intricate calculations for leveling, are still used in construction today. The Egyptians may not have had the word engineering, but they were certainly masters of the craft. The Greeks and their understanding of water, early hydraulics. Fast forward to ancient Greece, and we see another brilliant application of science, even before the term existed. Greek engineers were already experimenting with water in ways that showed a deep understanding of hydraulics, long before modern engineering figured out the same concepts. Take the water clock, for example, or the famous aqueducts that brought fresh water into ancient cities. These weren't just plumbing systems, they were a clear example of fluid dynamics and how water can be controlled and channeled with the right materials and techniques. One of the most impressive Greek inventions was the Antikythera mechanism, an analog computer built around 100 BCE to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. Think about this. A device that could predict celestial movements accurately, using gears and mechanical parts. We're talking about technology that rivals modern-day computers, except this was built long before anyone had even heard of electricity or computers. The Greeks didn't know the term mechanical engineering, but what they were building was as sophisticated as anything we use today. He didn't have scientific labs or advanced textbooks, but through observation and experimentation, he developed concepts that formed the bedrock for fluid mechanics, which is still a vital part of engineering today. The Romans and the invention of concrete, a formula for success. Now, let's move to the Romans, masters of architecture and infrastructure. The Romans didn't have chemistry as a science, but they sure understood how to mix materials to create strong, lasting structures. One of their greatest inventions? Concrete. Romans developed a type of concrete that was stronger and more durable than anything before it. In fact, many of their concrete buildings and aqueducts have lasted thousands of years. Their secret? A special mix of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater that formed a chemical reaction, making their concrete resistant to cracking and erosion. This might not sound that impressive until you consider that their aqueducts, roads, and buildings were engineering marvels that withstood the test of time, and still stand in parts of Europe today. They were developing formulas and techniques that were light years ahead of their time, and in doing so, they laid the foundation for the world's modern infrastructure. The Chinese and gunpowder, chemistry, before chemistry, had a name. The Chinese are another civilization that was using science long before the term science existed. You might know the story of gunpowder, but what's fascinating is how the ancient Chinese developed it. Around the 9th century, Chinese alchemists were trying to create an immortality potion. Instead, they stumbled upon something that would change the world forever: gunpowder. They didn't know chemistry, but through trial and error, they mixed sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter, creating the explosive substance that would revolutionize warfare and industry. They were experimenting with substances, making discoveries, and laying the groundwork for what would eventually become modern chemistry. What started as a quest for eternal life turned into one of the most influential scientific discoveries in human history. And just like that, chemistry was born, but not with the name, just through the application of knowledge. The Islamic Golden Age, a revolution in medicine and astronomy. During the Islamic Golden Age, which stretched from the 8th to the 14th century, scholars were making groundbreaking advances in fields like medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and even optics. These scholars didn't have the scientific community we know today, but they laid down the intellectual foundations for much of what we now consider modern science. Take Ibn al-Haytham, for example, who is often called the father of optics. He made major advancements in understanding how light works, developing the first true scientific method for investigating vision, reflection, and refraction. And then there's Avicenna, whose medical texts were used as authoritative references in Europe for centuries. What's wild is that these scholars didn't call their work science. They didn't even have the term. But what they were doing was pure science, based on observation, experimentation, and evidence. It's clear that these minds were using science long before it was recognized or named as such. The Renaissance, the awakening of scientific thought. Finally, let's talk about the Renaissance, that period in the 14th to 17th centuries when science truly began to take shape as we know it today. Think about figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Galileo Galilei, men who were obsessed with understanding the world, not just through art or philosophy, but through experiment, observation, and the application of logic. They didn't have modern scientific tools, but they used what they had: sketchbooks, telescopes, and a relentless curiosity to make discoveries that would form the bedrock of modern science. Galileo, for instance, is famous for his contributions to astronomy, but his work also revolutionized physics. He didn't have the fancy labs we have now, but he used simple tools to observe the stars and the planets, challenging the conventional wisdom of his time. His scientific approach laid the foundation for the scientific method, a tool we still use today in every branch of science. In essence, early inventors were already doing science long before we gave it that name. They were just experimenting, observing, and applying knowledge to make life better. Today, we stand on their shoulders, pushing the limits of what we can achieve, and who knows what tomorrow's inventors will do with the knowledge we have today. And so, as we continue to explore the frontiers of science and technology, remember, these early inventors were already shaping the future, even before they had a name for it. So, who knows what amazing discoveries are just around the corner for us?